There we go. Gonna crank up the
Oh,
hold on a second.
Oh, she's gonna move back out of the way a little bit. So that you up here.
Okay, you see this, Bruce?
yeah,
So we're gonna talk about love and compassion, and that's the focus. We've been kind of walking around love for years, and we've never really talked what is love, okay? And
right.
I remember Ron said when he went into very deep meditation that he encountered love, and it was, incredible ecstasy, something that he said was indescribable. He never had that before. Um, but it sounded like for him it was a one-shot thing. So a particular set of circumstances. So we're going to try and go into this in some detail. We'll see what we come up with.
All right.
So why love and compassion? So that we go back to the teachings of Yeshua, the Nazarene, and his companion, Mary Magdalene, and they both stress the importance of deep prayer and meditation. And doing this in turn made it possible to achieve love for yourself, and through this, love for your neighbor, or compassion if your neighbor was not understanding their own love for themselves. So love and compassion are key tenets of samadhi, the way of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and the deep meditation is needed to really achieve this love and compassion. So let's try and define what is love and compassion.
Right.
So we start with the obvious. Love is a feeling of strong attraction and emotional attachment to a person, an animal, a thing. It's expressed in many forms, encompassing a range of strong, positive emotional and mental states, from the most sublime virtue or good habit or the deepest interpersonal affection to the simplest pleasure. I have a feeling here that true love, especially like what Ron encountered, is at the top levels with the people that are highly attuned to this, is far beyond anything that I'm talking about here.
Yeah, it is.
I just flagging that. So an example of this range of meanings, the love of a mother differs very much from the love of a spouse, which differs very much from the love of food. I think we'd all agree to that, but there's probably many, many other types of love. So love's considered to be both positive and negative. Its virtue representing kindness, compassion, affection. So the unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of another. And its vice represents a moral flaw akin to vanity, selfishness, amour propre, and egotism. So it may also describe the compassionate and affectionate actions toward other humans or oneself or animals. In its various form, love acts as a major facilitator of interpersonal relationships owing to its central psychological importance. It's one of the most common themes in the creative arts. And love has been postulated to be a function that keeps human beings together against menaces and facilitates the continuation of the species. So the Greeks came up with 6 forms of love: familial love, storge; friendly love or platonic love, philia; romantic love, eros; self-love, philautia; guest love, xenia; and divine or unconditional love, agape.
Agape.
Probably agape is the deepest. I'm just looking at this list of the 6 that it has the most dimensions to it. So modern authors have distinguished further varieties of love, and the list goes on and on here. And numerous cultures have distinguished Ren, Yuan Fen, on and on. Among, let's see, these are all these words, and I'm not familiar with these words, so, but they all, for some people, mean something related to love, or they're defining moments that English doesn't have words for.
Hesed is Hebrew.
Yeah. So the color wheel theory of love defines 3 primary, 3 secondary, and 9 tertiary styles of love, and describes them in terms of the traditional color wheel. The triangular theory of love suggests intimacy, passion, and commitment are the core components of love. And so you can see how difficult it is for people to come to grips with what in the world is love. We're going all over the place. Love has additional religious or spiritual meaning. The diversity of uses and meanings combined with the complexity of the feelings involved makes love unusually difficult to consistently define compared to other emotional states. The one thing we saw was when people had done these brain scans, they discovered there's this one region of the brain that had to do with love or ecstasy or sexual stimulation or laughter or happiness or whatever you want to call it. And music stimulates these things, and so do drugs. So that might be as good a definition as any, is love is something that would stimulate that area of the brain. Lust is the initial passionate sexual desire that promotes mating when you're teenagers and all juiced up with hormones. And the increased release of hormones leads to this lust. But the lust rarely lasts for more than weeks or months. And attraction is more individualized, and romantic desire for a specific person or candidate for mating, which develops out of lust as a commitment to an individual mate form. So recent studies in neuroscience indicate people fall in love, that as people fall in love, the brain consistently releases certain set of chemicals, including the neurotransmitter hormones, dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. And these are the same compounds released by amphetamine, or stimulating the brain's pleasure center and leading to the side effects such as increased heart rate, reduced appetite and sleep, intense feeling of excitement, so forth. So this stage lasts maybe from 1.5 to 3 years is the best guess, but it doesn't last forever. So the lust and attraction stages are both considered temporarily, and the third stage is really needed to account for long-term love relationship. And the attachment is the bonding that promotes relationships lasting for many years, even decades. Attachment is generally based on commitments such as marriage and children, or mutual friendship based on things like the shared interests. And it's been linked to higher levels of the chemicals, oxytocin and vasopressin, to a greater degree than what is found in short-term relationships. This one chap reported protein molecule with the nerve growth factor, NGF, has very high levels when people first fall in love, but these levels drop back down after about a year. And then another psychologist formulated this triangular theory of love into 3 components: intimacy, commitment, and passion. And intimacy is when 2 people share confidences and various details of their personal lives, usually shown in friendships and romantic love affairs. Commitment is the expectation the relationship is permanent, and passionate love is shown in infatuation as well as romantic love. So all forms of love are viewed as varying combinations of these 3 components. Non-love does not include any of these components. Liking only includes intimacy. Infatuated love only includes passion. Empty love only includes commitment. Romantic love includes both intimacy and passion. Compassionate love includes intimacy and commitment. Fatuous love includes passion and commitment. And consummate love includes all three components. So there you go. So now let's look at what some other people have to say about this. This is all highly abstract. So we turn to Simone de Beauvoir. Bruce, do you know who she is? I would say she was born in France, and I would view her as a great philosopher. What would you say, Marjorie?
She wrote a lot. She was, definitely a writer. She was best known, I think, as the love of Jean-Paul Sartre.
Right, Sartre and de Beauvoir were. I don't know if Sartre was he married to her?
I don't think they were married, but they were together for decades.
Yeah, it's like Mitterrand when he died. All these people showed up in the receiving line, and the person that met them was Mitterrand's mistress. Very French. Or the other one was Picasso. Picasso confessed to having gone through at least 10,000 women.
Oh my God.
The problem with Picasso was the women would throw themselves at him. He just had a line at the door. So anyway, Simone de Beauvoir is very French. So it's in relationships that we discover both our depths and our limits, that we anneal ourselves and transcend ourselves, there that we are hurt the most, and there that we find the most healing. That's a good catch. That when you're in love and then something happens that you're really hurt by this other person that you're in love with, and you grow from that. But despite what a crucible of our emotional and spiritual lives, relationships are, or perhaps precisely because of it, they can be riddling and nebulous, destabilizing in their fluidity and ambiguity, leaving us grasping for the comforting solidity of categories and labels. The ancient Greeks, in their pioneering effort to order the chaos of the cosmos, neatly taxonomized them into filial love, which is the kind we feel for siblings, children, parents, friends; eros, the love of lovers, the incredible passion; and agape, the deepest, purest, most impersonal and spiritual love, and the one that has, I think, the greatest dimensions to it. After the Enlightenment discounted all love as a malfunction of reason, that was because the Enlightenment tried to put everything into some framework of reason, and love didn't fit into it. So they just said, oh, this is a malfunction. But then after the Enlightenment, the Romantics showed up as a reaction to the Enlightenment, and they reclaimed love, and revised the ancient taxonomy into a hierarchy under the tyranny of which we still live, placing eros at the pinnacle of human existence. And yet our deepest relationships, the one in which we both become most fully ourselves and are most emboldened to change, tend to elude the commonplace classification and to shape shift across the span of life. So she's arguing that it's not eros. She was born 1908, died 1986. She was only 19 when she wielded her uncommon intellect at these questions on the pages of her journal, later published as Diary of Philosophy Student. In between composing her resolutions for life worth living, Beauvoir began thinking seriously about the nature of love its dialogue with her own nature, what she may want of it, and what it may demand of her. In brief, how souls can interact with one another. In the midst of an intellectual infatuation with a young man who would go on to become an eminent philosopher himself, not the one she would eventually marry in a convention-breaking union of minds, she examines the subsistence of the feeling.
The substance.
Substance.
You need a proofreader.
I have my mouth engaged instead of my brain. To say that I love him, what does that mean? Does the word itself have meaning? Questioning the tangle of idolization and desire that masquerades as love, she grows suspicious of the very concept of personal love as an absurdity against the backdrop of the largest love we can carry. When you love beings, not for their intelligence, but for what they have been, what they have in their very depths, for their soul, you love them equally. They are entireties, perfect inasmuch as they are to be equal to perfection. So why then is there this desire to get closer, to know them, and thus to love them more perfectly for what they really are? What is surprising is not that we love them at all, but rather we prefer one of them. So invoking the love she feels for her friends, the sum total of them, she writes, "Something sharp runs through me, which is my love for them. This is not intellectual love, this is a love for souls, from all of me toward all of them in their entirety." Over and over, she returns to this elemental question. What then is love? Not much, not much. Sensitivity, imagination, fatigue, this effort to depend upon one another, the taste for the mystery of the other, the need to admire. What is worthwhile is friendship, this profound mutual confidence between two people and this joy of knowing that the other exists. Drawing on Hegel's philosophy of freedom, in which for any conscious subject to be free means freeing the other, she arrives at a formula for the ideal friendship: absolute reciprocity in the identity of consciousness. The cultural ideal of romantic love, on the other hand, replaces this absolute reciprocity with engulfment and sublimation of oneself into the other. She writes, "It seems to me that love should not make all else disappear, but should simply tint it with new nuances. I would like a love that accompanies me throughout life, not that absorbs all my life." This is, of course, Rilke's model of a perfect relationship, one in which the highest task of a bond between two people is that each should stand guard over the solitude of the other, consonant with Octavio Paz's lovely definition of love as a knot made of two intertwined freedoms. Beauvoir ultimately found it not in romantic love, but in the deepest friendship of her life, that with Zaza, her childhood best friend. A year older than her and also enamored of books, Zaza was the only one with whom the young Simone could have real conversations. In Memories of a Dutiful Daughter, the first volume of her autobiography, largely a loving memorial to this formative relationship, she would write of talking to Zaza. "My tongue was suddenly loosened, and 1,000 bright suns began blazing in my breast, radiant with happiness. When Zaza's dress caught fire and charred her leg to the bone, she endured the long convalescence valiantly, then went on to climb trees and do cartwheels, to play the piano and violin." Beauvoir relays a moment radical in the context of early 20th century bourgeois society, emblematic of Zaza's defiant spirit and playful disdain for convention. One year at a music recital, Zaza did something while she was playing the piano, which was very nearly scandalous. The hall was packed, and the front rows were the pupils in their best frocks, curled and ringleted and beribboned, who were awaiting their turn to show off their talents. Behind them sat the teachers and tutors in stiff black silk bodices, wearing white gloves. At the back of the hall were seated the parents and their guests. Zaza, resplendent in blue taffeta, played a piece which her mother thought was too difficult for her. She always had to scramble through a few of the bars, but this time she played it perfectly, and casting a triumphant glance at her mother, put out her tongue at her. All the little girls' ringlets trembled with apprehension, and the teachers' faces froze into disapproving masks. But when Zsa came down from the platform, her mother gave her such a light-hearted kiss that no one dare reprimand her. For me, this exploit surrounded her with a halo of glory. Although I was subject to laws, to conventional behavior, to prejudice, I nevertheless liked anything novel, sincere, and spontaneous. I was completely won over by Zaza's vivacity and independence of spirit. The strength of spirit, this defiance of the givens, is what the young Simone most admired about her friend. It emboldened her to defy convention in her own life. Part of the unexamined convention Beauvoir had internalized growing up was the belief that in a well-regulated human heart, friendship occupies an honorable position. In a well-regulated human heart friendship occupies an honorable position. I have to figure out what's going on.
With the
But
emphasis going.
But it has neither the mysterious splendor of love nor the sacred dignity of filial devotion. And yet, through a relationship with Zaza, she came to question this limiting hierarchy of the emotions and to see friendships as the deepest stratum of connection. I love Zaza with an intensity which could not be accounted for by any established set of rules and conventions, she would reflect decades later. It was only in Zaza's absences inflicted by their families and schools, schedules, and the general fractures of continuity that life presents, that Beauvoir came to grasp the importance, the consolation, the salvation of her friend's presence. So total had been my ignorance of the workings of the heart, that I hadn't thought of telling myself, I miss her. I needed her presence to realize how much I needed her. This was a blinding revelation. All at once, conventions, routines, and the careful categorizing of emotions were swept away. I was overwhelmed by a flood of feeling that had no place in any code. I allowed myself to be uplifted by that wave of joy, which went on mounting inside me, as violent and fresh as a water-falling cataract, as naked, beautiful, and bare as a granite cliff. In her diary, she recounts one such reunion during her freshman year as a philosophy student. I found Zaza again. All last year and during this vacation, I believed that she was far, very far from me. And there she was, infinitely close by, and now we're going to be true friends. Oh, what a beautiful meaning this word has. Never have we spoken so, and I was not even hoping that it could happen, but why too, never believe in happiness. Let us bring our two solitudes together. When I'd left her, I experienced one of the most beautiful hours of my life, my love and my friendship, both greater from the reunion. Beauvoir was discovering deep friendship as safer and more resilient than romance, free from the great hatreds of love, the irremediable pride, the passionate ruptures, the mutual tortures, never introducing jealousy, demands, and doubts, to have what the ancient Celts called anam cara, soul friend, asks everything of us, invites all the parts we live with, and urges us to show up whole, yet demands nothing. Looking back on our life, Beauvoir reflects, I didn't require Zaza to have any such definite feelings about me. It was enough to be her best friend. The admiration I felt for her did not diminish me in my own eyes. Love is not envy. I could think of nothing better in the world than being myself and loving Zaza. Midway through Beauvoir's sophomore year, Zaza died suddenly and mysteriously, an illness swift and merciless as an owl. She was 21. Amid the savage grief, Beauvoir turned even more sharply toward philosophy, seeking its eternal consolations. Across the sweep of the years and decades, Zsa's indistinguishable presence never left her life. No one you love is ever dead, Ernest Hemingway wrote around that time in a letter of consolation to an inconsolable friend. Loving Zsa had ignited Beauvoir's becoming, setting her on the course of who she would become, one of humanity's most daring breakers of convention, her ideas reaching into the depths of her time, shaping the times to come, touching the lives of generations of strangers the way true friendship does, touching mine, perhaps touching yours. Now we turn to someone totally different, Oliver Sacks, and he wrote this just a bunch of essays. He called it letters. Only art penetrates what pride, passion, intelligence, and habit erect on all sides, the seeming realities of this world. Saul Bellow insisted in his magnificent Nobel acceptance speech, there's another reality, the genuine one, which we lose sight of. This other reality is always sending us hints, which without art, we can't receive. It's a beautiful sentiment, beautiful and incomplete. Art is but one way of contacting that deeper reality. Science is another, with its revelation of truth so beyond sight that they seem inconceivable from the billions of neutrinos passing through your body this very second, to the hummingbird's flight, to the quantum bewilderment of the subatomic world. But more than art, more than science, we've invented one implement to cut through the curtain of habit and render the world new. Love alone blues the sky and greens the grass and brightens all the light we see. It's the last irreducible reality whose mystery no painting or poem can fully capture, and no magnetic resonance imaging can fully explain. In 1965, the poetic neurologist Oliver Sacks, 1933 to 2015, moved from Los Angeles, where he just finished a graduate program at UCLA, to New York, where he was offered a post at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. He found the city a place of fantastic creative furor, but his painful introversion and sense of difference left him feeling friendless. That summer, just before beginning his new job, he traveled home to London. While in Europe, he met Jeno Vincenz, a charismatic Hungarian theater director living in Berlin. Oliver had been planning to go into a neurology conference in Vienna. Instead, he found himself in Paris, in Amsterdam, in love with Jeno. Here was a rigorous and original scientist who would devote his life to illuminating the neurological underpinnings of our strangest mental states, suddenly subsumed in the strangest and most mysterious of them all. He will later look back on this time of one of intense sense of love, death, and transience, inseparably mixed. When he reluctantly returned to New York, Oliver set about trying to bridge the abyss of physical absence by rendering his world alive in words, composing some of the greatest love letters that I've read. In one of the treasures collected in his posthumously published book, Letters, which is here, he writes, "My dearest Jeno, I've clutched your letter in my pocket all day. Now I have time to write to you. It's 7 o'clock, the ending of a perfect day. The sun is mauve and crimson on the New York skyline, reflected from the cubes and prisons of an Aztec city. Black clouds, like wolves, are racing through the sky. Jets climbing on a long white tail, howling wind. I love its howling. I went to howl for joy myself. The trees are thrashing to and fro. An old man runs after his hat. It's darker now. The sun is set. The city, a black diagram on the somber skyline, and soon there'll be a billion lights." He isn't, of course, describing the city as it is, but as he is. This, in the end, may be what love is, the billion lights inside to make the whole world luminous, an inner sun to render every dull surface and every dark space radiant. I don't feel the distance either, only the nearness. We're together all the while. I feel your breath on the side of my neck. My blood is champagne. I fizz with happiness. I smile like a lighthouse in all direction. Everyone catches and reflects my smile. I want to share my joys with you, to see the green crab scuttling for the shadow, translucent egg cases hung from seaweed, a little octopus just hatched, jetting for joy in the salty water, sea anemones, the soft, sweet pressure if you touch their center, the chalky hands of barnacles, and Polly cheats in their splendid liveries that remind me of Versailles, moving with insensate grace, and dive with me under the ocean, through the fish like birds which accept your presence, and scarlet sponges in a hidden cave, and the freedom, the complete and utter freedom of motion, second only to that of space itself. So Oliver yearned to transport not only to the world he walked through, but to the world within, the world he would always have best access and best channel in writing. The act of writing, he would reflect a lifetime later, is a special, indispensable form of talking to myself. Now he talks to his beloved. I read Psalms in profanity for the joy they contain and the trust and the love and the pure morning language. I write so much, I want to catch everything and share it with you. You'll be deprived of all of your social life, your sleep, your food, condemned to read interminable letters. Poor committed to a lover who's never silent, who talks all day, talks all night, and talks in company, and talks to himself. Words are the medium into which I must translate reality. I live in words, in images, metaphors, syllables, rhymes. I can't help it. Again and again, he keeps returning to this new quality of light, suddenly revealed by love. The weather has been supernal beauty. The day steeps everything in golden liquid. A sidewalk cafe in the evening with a wonderful amber light flooding through the doors and the windows. Huge, mad stars in an indigo sky. For this, you have to be great, crazy, or wildly in love. I never saw that golden light before we met in Paris. Perhaps it was this brush with the irreducible immensity of love that would later lead Oliver to write so presently about the limits of artificial intelligence and so poignantly about the meaning of our human lives. 2 days later, he writes again, I love you insanely, and it's the sweetest sanity I've ever known. I read and reread your wonderful letter. I feel in my pocket through 10 layers of clothing. Its trust, its warmth, exceed anything I've ever known. I believe we are both infinite, I see the future as an endless expansion of the present, not the remorseless tearing off of calendar leaves. Like all people in love, Oliver was envisioning a life with not once imagining they would never see each other again, that he would spend the next 35 years celibate and afraid of love, afraid of himself in love. But love would find him in the end, a beautiful and bright love that would hold him through dying with dignity. Now we go to D.H. Lawrence. This is Lawrence of Arabia, right? D.H. Lawrence?
Right.
But that's another book, Aaron's Rod is.
Yeah, this is a novel that he wrote. If you live long enough and wide enough, you come to see that love is simply the breadth of the aperture through which you let in the reality of another and the quality of attention you pay what you see. It is, in this sense, not a phenomenon that happens unto you, but a creative act. The poet Robert Graves knew this. Love is not kindly nor yet grim, but does to you as you to him. He wrote as a young man, a lifetime before the old man came to define love as recognition of truth, or recognition of another person's integrity and truth in a way that makes both of you light up when you recognize the quality in the other. So most of our heartbreak, most of our aching sense of failure at love comes from the idea central to our dominant culture mythology that this truth, this recognition, is a static reward to be attained through effort, through bargaining, through self-negation, rather than the dynamic process. It is an endpoint state of soul merging rather than an infinite vector of growing understanding, of deepening mutual compassion, of simultaneous self-possession and unselfing. So D.H. Lawrence, 1885 to 1930, mounts a passionate defense of the process over the product in his autobiographically tinted 1922 novel, Aaron's Rod, which is animated by the perennial question, perennial confusion of what love actually is, what it looks like between people, and how it lives within a person. So there you have it. Unwilling to risk love, danger of self-abandon, yet unable to accept loneliness as a state of fulfillment, the protagonist attributes the irreconcilable tension to a broken cultural model of love as a battle in which each party strove for the mastery of the other soul. He reckons with the necessary recalibration. We've pushed a process into a goal. The aim of any process is not the perpetuation of that process, but the completion thereof. Love is a process of the incomprehensible human soul. Love also incomprehensible, but still only a process. The process should work to a completion, not to some horror of intensification and externity, wherein the soul and body ultimately perish. The completion of the process of love is the arrival at a state of simple, pure self-possession. Only that which isn't exciting enough for us sensationalists. We prefer abysses and maudlin self-abandon and self-sacrifice, the organization, the degeneration into a sort of slime and merge. Perhaps truly the process of love is never accomplished, but it moves in great stages. At the end of each stage, a true goal where the soul possesses itself in simple and generous singleness, and without this, love is a disease. Given this process demands everything of us, given it asks us to risk everything, perhaps it's just easier to spare ourselves the pain of longing and the anxiety of loss by not undertaking it at all. He considers this, seduced by the fantasy of a life free from longing and therefore immune to disappointment, and tries to find affirmation for it in nature, whose living metaphors are always the clearest mirrors for the soul. The lily toils and spins hard enough in her own way, but without that strain and that anxiety with which we try to weave ourselves a life. The lily is life-rooted, life-central. She cannot worry. She is life itself, a little delicate fountain playing creatively for as long or short a time as may be, and unable to be anxious. Happy lily, never to be saddled with an idée fixe, never to be in the grip of a monomania for happiness or love or fulfillment. And yet he realizes this way of being is a negation of something elemental. It gives the illusion of life-rootedness, but denies the soul its necessary flight. He considers another way of being, one truer to the nature of love and the nature of the soul, being happily alone in the wonders of communion, swept up on the winds, but never swept away from one's very self. Dawning on the dalliance of the eagles, drawing on the dalliance of the eagles, exulting in the birds, rushing, amorous contact, high in space together. Their way of attaining a motionless, still balance in the air and then parting. Lawrence reflects on the balance between communion and self-possession that it models. Two eagles in midair, maybe. Two eagles in midair, grappling, whirling, coming to their intensification of love oneness there in midair. In midair, the love consummation, but all the time, each lifted on its own wings, each bearing itself up on its own wings at every moment of the midair love consummation. That is the splendid love way. Actually, one time we were in the Rift Valley in Kenya, and we're up at 7,000 or 8,000 feet on this hill, and these two eagles were diving after one another. Exactly what he was talking about here. It looks like they were trying to mate.
Hold on, I wanna go.
Right.
The lily toils not, from the Psalms.
Right.
The lily toils and spins hard enough. So he's going against that
Right.
conventional wisdom in
Right. That's what he's doing.
an interesting way, in her own way. But without that strain and that anxiety, the lily is life rooted.
Yeah.
Well, just
This is his take on this beautiful lily. But he could be dead wrong. Lily could be in love.
well, he's just totally in love with love and the Sturm and
Yeah.
all of it. But
Yeah, he was into fast motorcycles, and that's how he did himself in. He was out there blasting down the roads, and at some point your luck runs out. So now we go to St. Paul on love and the egret. Among the myriad things that didn't have to exist, music, minds, the meadow lark, none is more symphonic, more defiant of logic, more capable of winging existence with life than love. Biologically, we could have done without it. We could have spent the eons fertilizing cells without feeling. Hydrogen need not love oxygen to bind into the molecular cathedral that makes this rocky planet a wet, breathing world. But we, creatures of poetry and psalms, bind differently, bind with passion and purpose, with the blessed bewilderment we call love. It breaks us and it balances us. It is the great miracle and the great moral imperative, the first and final truth of life. Hardly anyone, except perhaps Hannah Arendt, has captured this all-transcending and all-demanding power of love more precisely yet poetically than Paul the Apostle. Actually, he wasn't an apostle because Jesus had been crucified, and Paul was out there going after all the Christians. He was trying to kill off all the Christians, and he was on the road to Damascus when all of a sudden he had his vision. And so anyway, Paul the Apostle, a saint, not only in the religious tradition, but also by Leonard Cohen's definition of the saints among us. St. Paul, whose central teaching was that hope, faith, and love are the fundaments of life, but love is of them the most fundamental, writes, "If I have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres." I remember hearing this in a mass when I was a teenager. This is amazing writing. But perhaps love is the sum total of our experience, because experience is always larger than the meaning we give it. What love means is a question both too immense and too microscopic. with intimate subjectivities to be fitted to a single answer. It helps to be given a little guidance in how to love and a simple, perfect definition. It helps to be given some assurance that it is never, even in our darkest hour, beyond our reach. And if all else fails, it helps to ask a bird for a divination. Among the great salvations, that was Paul, okay? Now we go off to rocks. A geologist's love of rocks. So here you have something, the rock is inert. Like how could you possibly be in love with something that's a rock? So here's this geologist. Among the great salvations of my childhood were the rocks and minerals lining the bookshelves of our next door neighbor, a geologist working for the Bulgarian Ministry of Environment and Water. I spent long hours casting amethyst refractions on the ceiling, carving words into the cutting board with a shard of obsidian, seeing alien oceans and clouds in an orb of agate. How do you pronounce that?
Agate,
Agate?
I think.
Feeling in my small bones the almost unbearable beauty of this world and the size of time. I hadn't been alive a decade, and I was holding millions of years in my palm. Half a lifetime later, I coped with heartbreak by traversing a landmass to go live in the middle of an old-growth forest. Each day, I walked the same trails for hours, trying to make a new path through life between the ferns and the feelings. As the weeks unspooled into months, time did what it always does, and I began healing. One day, on my regular afternoon walk, my eye fell on a small heart-shaped stone. This is how it began. I suddenly started seeing them everywhere. Quarry of hearts strewing the once blank trails. Every day I filled my pockets with them, took them home, and painted them gold. I bought a vintage typesetter's drawer and hung it on the wall and placed a small stone heart in each compartment. Given my views on omens and the nature of the universe, I did not take them as signs. I took them as affirmation that we're in a pattern-seeking animals and makers of meanings who, from search images of what we are looking for, and then find it rises out of the vastness of reality by the fulcrum of the mind. This can endanger the life of the heart, for we can often carry an unconscious search image of a broken model of love, which we then find in the relationship we seek out. So the gift of the stone hearts was something else entirely. They helped me feel what is hard to fathom. Scales of space and time, too vast for the mind to hold, yet necessary for calibrating our transient existence and its fleeting tremors of the heart. They help me remember that if time can change the shape of even a rock, it can change the shape of a life. These existential undertones of stones permeate Turning Stones, which is this book that we have here. Here's the cover of the book. Discovering the Subtle Wisdom of Rocks by the geologist Marcia Bjornerud. Part memoir, part portal of science, part love letter to rocks as raconteurs or companions, mentors, oracles, and sources of existential reassurance. Lens through the science and wonder of particular rocks that have made our planet a world, from familiar pillars of civilization like granite and flint to molecular marvels like dolomite and diamosite. At a time when subatomic colliders are searching for the God particle and space telescopes are peering into the beginning of time, amid cosmological concepts too abstract and scales too immense for us to fully grasp, Grunerud celebrates stone as a way of anchoring ourselves in our planetary inheritance, inseparable from our cosmic origins, yet intimate and alive. We now know that the rocks may hold the key to the origin of life. She writes, geology with its focus on tangible records of the distant past, offers a bridge between human experience of the world and the awe-inspiring but cold, formidable emptiness of space. Learning to read the storylines of Earth's history directly from rocks, understanding the plots and protagonists that shape the places where we live, can help to provide a feeling of embeddedness in the cosmos, a sense of continuity and kinship with the past and the future. Perhaps the most distinctive characteristic of geologic thinking is the practice of roaming freely across many scales in space and time. In doing so, we can see ourselves in miniature, part of a long lineage of creatures on a creative planet that has renewed itself for more than 4 billion years while keeping an idiosyncratic diary of its activities over time in the form of rocks. Developing a collection of ourselves as Earthlings, native inhabitants of an old, durable planet, may bring reassurance in time when so many human systems that once seemed robust are showing signs of fragility. Epochs ago, when we were first fathoming the nature of the universe and our place in it, Johannes Kepler, who devised his revolutionary laws, planetary motion, while defending his mother in a witchcraft trial, was ridiculed for seeing the Earth as an ensouled body that has indigestion, that suffers illness, that inhales and exhales like a living organism. Quarter of a millennium later, the young German marine biologist Ernst Haeckel gave scientific shape to that belief in coining the word ecology, which remained an obscure academic term until Rachel Carson made it a household word with Silent Spring, her book, a century later. A generation after Carson insisted that our origins are of the earth, and so there is in us a deeply seated response to the natural universe, which is part of our humanity. Bjornerud indicates Kepler, and with an eye to panpsychism, considers the rehumanizing power of relating the stony body of the world. We are creatures shaped by the planet's rocky logic. Each of us is most fundamentally an earthling. On the beach, pebbles of Ordovician dolomite prattle with Archean granite, their combined memories spanning half the age of Earth. Rocks assure us that no less real than the present. I spot a walnut-sized piece of porphyritic basalt, one of the Chinese calligraphy stones my sister and I collected in childhood. I thank it for revealing itself to me and slip it into my pocket. The stones are communicating with one another, with the waves and the wind, with my feverish brain. A recent theory of consciousness posits the intelligent awareness can emerge when the components of a large system have a certain level of interconnectivity. So neurons in the human brain reach this critical threshold, and in the presence of these chattering cobbles, it seems obvious to me, according to this definition, that Earth itself is hyperconscious. And so that does it. That's what we have to say about love. So now we'll close out with a little thing on compassion, which is in some sense related to love. So compassion is a social feeling that motivates people to go out of their way to believe the physical, mental, or emotional pains of others and themselves. And compassion is sensitivity to the emotional aspects of the suffering of others, when based on notions such as fairness, justice, and interdependence, may be considered partially rational in nature. So compassion involves feeling for another and is a precursor to empathy. The feeling as another capacity, as opposed to sympathy, the feeling toward another. In common parlance, active compassion is the desire to alleviate another's suffering. So compassion involves allowing ourselves to be moved by suffering to help alleviate and prevent it. And active compassion is one that is intended to be helpful. Other virtues that harmonize with compassion include patience, wisdom, kindness, perseverance, warmth, and resolve. It's often, though not quite inevitably, the key component in altruism. The difference between sympathy and compassion is that the former responds to others' suffering with sorrow and concern, whereas the latter responds with warmth and care. So compassion is simply a variation of love or sadness, not a distinct emotion. That could be. From the perspective of evolutionary psychology, compassion can be viewed as a distinct emotional state, which can be differentiated from distress, sadness, and love. But compassion is, however, a synonym of empathic distress, which is characterized by the feeling of distress in connection with another person's suffering. This perspective of compassion is based on the finding that people sometimes emulate and feel the emotions of people around them. According to Thupten Jinpa, compassion is a sense of concern that arises in us in the face of someone who's in need of someone who is in pain. It's accompanied by a kind of a wishing or a desire to see the relief or end that situation, along with wanting, that's the motivation, to do something about it. Compassion is, however, not pity, neither an attachment nor the same as empathetic feeling, or even just simply wishful thinking. Compassion is basically a variation of love. To further this variation of love, these other people in their article called The Phenomenology of Change describe compassion with the definition of alleviate in mind. In the definition for alleviate, there's no mention of taking, stopping, or fixing someone's suffering. It's simply trying to make it less severe. This has connotation of desperation of sorts. Desiring so little from such a dire situation can be described as inspiring feelings to help with another's suffering in any way. So personality psychology agrees that human suffering is always individual and unique, and suffering can result from psychological, social, physical trauma, which happen in acute and chronic forms. But suffering's been defined as the perception of a person's impending destruction or loss of integrity, which continues until the threat is vanquished or the person's integrity can be restored. Compassion has three major requirements. The compassionate person must feel the troubles that evoke their feelings are serious, the belief that the sufferer's troubles are not self-inflicted, and the ability to picture oneself with the same problems in a non-blaming or non-shaming manner. This matches what we saw with Job. Compassion.
It's got, I think, a lot more depth than the usual, like, New Age thinking nowadays, where people are very quick to say, oh, well, there's no such thing as a victim. Well, that's not what Martin Luther King said. That's not
Right.
what Gandhi said. You know, there is, you don't have to identify with it forever. But,
Right.
you know, there is such a thing as suffering. And it can change you enormously. It can be a very profound, life-changing experience. Or contending with somebody else's suffering, I think, even more than your own, can be an incredibly deep transformational experience. That I think there's a certain kind of growth you can only get from that.
Right.
And to just brush it away as you know, an illusion and nothing, as you know, a self-absorbed fantasy, I think is really missing mark.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of depth is born of it. It's and feeling somebody else's pain is you know, it's often sharper than your own. And I think that can lead to a kind of universal love.
Mm-hmm. So this is just an example of doing some magnetoresonance imaging, and they noticed the different areas of the head that responded differently. They're trying to see where compassion is. But compassion for social pain in others was associated with strong activation in certain areas, while compassion for physical pain ended up with different areas. I don't know what I would do with this, but so be it. Compassion for social pain activated this section to a lesser extent, and so it goes. Feelings and acts of compassion stimulate areas known to regulate homeostasis, such as the anterior insula, etc. This supports the hypothesis that social emotions use some of the same basic devices involved in other primary emotions. And that is it. It's tough to come up with anything on compassion.
Well, I'd like to sort of review how the Buddhists approach Buddhism. They're a lot more methodical about it.
Sure.
Well, to start off, in Buddhism, the negative emotions like anger, being judgmental, criticism, and what's the other one? Resentment, hypercriticism, and guilt. These are all negative emotions. They're all considered illusory and have no meaning whatsoever. Okay.
So they're like an absence. They're to be illusory means they're just like a void. You have a hole. And if you fill the hole in, you'd have compassion or love.
Yeah, well, they're just considered illusory and appearances. They're not don't have reality at all. This is what happens in meditation, because in meditation, the first thing that is upsets somebody meditating are negative emotions. So anyway, but basically, in Buddhism, they have meditation on love. So love is you radiate from the heart. There's two ways of meditating on love, and that is you radiate love from your heart center, to your family, and then your friends, then acquaintances, and then enemies. Or you can do it by distance, like people in this block, in this city, in this country, and then the whole world. So you radiate love from your heart center in that way. And you practice it, you do an hour of it every day. And I did that meditation for years, right? And you do the same with compassion. You radiate compassion to all people who are suffering, and maybe may they be alleviated of the causes of suffering. So it's a very deep meditation. It really does change your reality of thinking of other people. Anyway,
Sure.
That's a Buddhist approach to love and compassion.
Well, I mean, but you had the benefit of telepathy. You had your Namchal Rinpoche there as your teacher, and you were linked to him. When you were linked to him, you could sense love. You could, how would you describe that? It was the love of a teacher for a pupil.
Well, the biggest thing that Nanj Rinpoche taught me telepathically is he had this vast love for all living beings. It was like as big as the universe. It's a huge love and compassion for everything that's alive, everything that's living. It's a very expansive part of the mind. That's one of the things that he showed me. But in terms of practice, basically, when you do a lot of practice of love and compassion, you develop a lot of nonverbal understanding. of love and compassion. Anyway, that's the Buddhist approach.
No,
Well, my life has been changed with the Hawaiian practice of Ho'oponopono with forgiveness for ourselves and others. And see, I started doing it in the early 2000s, so I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, and then moved away from it for a while, then went back toward it. And now, since Bart and I've been together, we've been doing it every day for about the
yeah, and
last
it's
5
very
years.
simple. It just says, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I thank you, I love you. And yet it's powerful enough because it's so simple that it can have real impact.
Oh yeah.
I find different people show up, and it'll be different people that I'm in various, dynamics with, conflict and so on. People who are trying to take my house. And I just have to say, I don't want to just go on and on in the same bad loop, like a bad program. Um, so just letting go of more and more and saying, well, there's some wounds there, there's something, some scar that I don't understand, and that's okay. I could just forgive it. I can just let go and forgive myself. I think I have often an easier time having unconditional love and forgiveness for somebody else than myself. But I think it's just as important to give that to ourselves. Um, I find it just changing everything. And for me, it's not about a complete transcendence. I want to sort of stay real in the dynamic, but with detachment, I guess that's the way to say it. Without just being attached to my own identification of my own point of view and agenda for it. It's a slow process, but as different people show up, I'm finding myself letting go of things that I never would have thought I'd be able to let go of. And just not spiral down into this completely unforgiving hatred that I think is a lot of what's wrong with the world, and that people just get addicted to it. They just get mesmerized and completely caught up in it. And we can let go of it.
Well, one of the helpful insights in Buddhism is that suffering has a cause. All, anger, hatred, and all that is all has a cause. And I mean, it goes into previous lifetimes and that sort of thing, which is kind of difficult for the Western mind to comprehend. But it kind of gives you a kind of a detachment towards negative emotions and so on, because you know that it's actually illusory to begin with. Or in Buddhism, they use this word emptiness, like
Right.
it has no meaning. No, it's empty already. That sort of thing. And that kind of gives you inherent detachment from what normal people have a lot of negativity towards.
And that's freedom. And then what other things can come into that place. Because it's not already full. I don't know. It's I don't know, it's changing me in ways that I'm still in the process of. So I can't even put it into words intelligently. It's
Yeah.
dissolving a lot of things that I thought were, bedrock of
Yeah.
of what made me me. And it's a kind of freedom to move out of that identification with and just see what all other kinds of things are possible without that attachment and identification.
Mm.
And that we can just, I don't know, we can just be where we are and walk. We can just
Yeah.
move through things. Um,
Well, this is what I mean by nonverbal wisdom sort of unfolds on its own. And a lot of the negative emotions you used to think were real, all of a sudden are no longer real.
Right.
and I'm learning, well, if one thing doesn't happen the way I, envision it happening, the way I'm attached to it happening, something else will happen that I can't even imagine, that I can't predict.
Yeah.
So there's just often no point being attached to,
Yeah.
plan A happening, because it'll be something else,
Yeah.
until it comes to an end. But if one thing doesn't work out, something else will work out. And as I say, I often can't even imagine it, so why bother,
Yeah.
Um, and just for me, it's almost always at the last possible minute that something else comes about. That it seems like it wasn't possible before that minute because I couldn't see it. But then something else just, materializes and well, I never would have thought of that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's often better than anything that I would have thought of, and
Right.
you just take the leap. And if one thing doesn't happen, something else will happen, and that'll be fine too. So it's a kind of portability that we can just kind of walk the planet. If the sea rises here, if we're in a tune, then we'll know in time and walk somewhere else. So might a lot of other people be going there, but um we get very fiercely attached to certain given outcomes that we're it's just imagining. And it's usually never exactly the way it's gonna turn out anyway. So, why not just uh walk over here, walk over there, do something else that is unforeseeable. So,
Yeah. The universe has that kind of tendency to do that, doesn't
right. Which is endlessly interesting and endlessly right, it's possible to interact with it creatively. I think it always is. It may really be something that we don't want, that we are, it's just anathema to our heart's desire, but it'll bring out some other thing that wouldn't have come about otherwise. So I kind of think we're on the verge of an adventure like this. Just by opening up to the unknown, just by
And we held on to the house as long as we could, but, yeah.
and I felt very passionate about you know the rightness of doing that. But at this point, the wrongness doesn't bother me in the same way. I think because it's time, somehow it's just time. And something else will come about that wouldn't come about otherwise. If we kept holding on with all of our might, we would block something else that we can't even imagine or anticipate. So I think it's time. I don't think it was until now. But I have the feeling that it's gonna be more than okay. It's gonna be somehow better than what we were attached to.
Yeah. We'll see.
Maybe not.
Okay, well, hope to see you in that living room next Wednesday, okay?
Okay. Or it might be the new one.
Yeah, we'll see. They're coming after us, everything. We'll see if we can hold them off or.
Yeah, they're really loaded for bear. I think we've given it our best. Bart came up with some really good stuff and,
They don't like facts.
right,
Oh, I see. Oh, that's too bad.
So I think that's what precipitated them saying enough is enough. Well, okay, have a good Bruce.
Okay.
Good weekend. Wish
Yeah.
it well.
Okay, you see it. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.